Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better. The idea of ontological momentum relates to a distinction between two kinds of causes. Physics is the science of moving bodies. In the history of physics, there was a physics between Aristotelian and Newtonian physics, namely Cartesian, Descartes' physics. If you learned it today, it would likely strike you as bizarre. It has one feature, though, to which I'd like to draw your attention. In fact, he mentions it in the fourth meditation in his Meditations on First Philosophy. First philosophy is ontology, the study of reality, and epistemology, the study of apprehension. Quote, because the entire period of one's life can be divided into countless parts, each of which in no way depends on the others, it does not follow from the fact that I existed a short while ago that I now ought to exist, unless some cause creates me once again, as it were, at this moment, end quote. Crest translation. Think about that for a moment. Do you sense its profound implications? A continuant is any entity that exists for two or more consecutive moments. We and trees and mountains and stars are all commonly taken to be continuants. In fact, it's not immediately easy to think of forms that aren't continuants. Descartes' suggestion in that passage is that we should distinguish an initiating cause from a sustaining cause. An initiating cause is what causes an entity to begin to exist. An entity is anything real, anything that exists. A sustaining cause is what causes a continuant to continue to exist at every moment of its existence. It's likely that the idea of a sustaining cause seems odd to you. If so, that's because you implicitly accept the principle of ontological momentum, namely, every entity will continue to exist until something causes it not to exist. I also suppose that there could also be a similar one for non-existent objects too. Every non-entity will continue not to exist until something causes it to exist. Should we accept the principle of ontological momentum? As we've seen with respect to physical momentum, Aristotle thought that we had to explain motion, whereas Newton thought that we only had to explain changes in motion. Do we have to explain reality or only changes in reality? Any thorough answer to this question would lead us to wonder what a good explanation is. It would also lead us to wonder what could be so powerful as to be a sustaining cause for the existence of every continuant for every moment of its existence. When something or other is required to fill in gaps in their theories, Western philosophers have never hesitated to use the God hypothesis to fill in the gaps in order to prop the theories up. That's exactly what any good Cartesian would do here. Only God could be so powerful as to be the sustaining cause for every continuant during its lifetime. Notice that generates a really powerful conception of God, who is responsible for the reality of every continuant at every moment of its life. In other words, distinguish the idea of God as the great watchmaker who creates the world and has stepped back from that creation, from the idea of God as the unimaginably powerful force that is creating the world anew at every moment. You'll recall that Descartes was one of the three great continental rationalists. Once you grasp the idea of God as not only the creating but sustaining cause of the world, it won't be difficult for you to grasp the also powerful ideas of God held by Spinoza and Leibniz. For someone with an outlook like Hume's, however, this is a reductio ad absurdum of rationalism. For empiricists like Hume, brute facts exist. Supposed facts about the world are either real or not. They don't require rational explanations. There's no reason to assume that the world is rational. Of course, rationalist philosophers assume that the world is rational, that it's false that brute facts exist. To borrow an analogy from Panath Butcherov, imagine that there are two groups of philosophers. There's a mountain ridge between them. Empiricists live on one side of the ridge, and rationalists live on the other. Although they can talk to each other, they are unable to see each other or to see what the other group sees of the world. Could the empiricists give the rationalists a sound argument that they should convert to empiricism, or vice versa? Nope. That won't happen. Reason is impotent to do that. This doesn't mean that the two groups will dislike or even hate each other. It just means that there is no rational way for one group to convince the other to adopt a different worldview. That's hopeless. One group thinks that God is required to make the world rational and intelligible. The other group thinks that the God hypothesis is not only useless but misleading. Now what? In the following video, let's briefly examine an important consequence of conceptual impasses like this. Cheers.